Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, it is so great to have you. I'm Antoinette, a New Zealander living in Germany. So, as many of you already know, I finally managed to make it back to New Zealand, my homeland, after over 5 years. It had just been so long since I was able to make it back to New Zealand for many reasons, one of them being the pandemic. It was just not possible for me to get back before then, and so it was an absolutely incredible experience for my family and I to be able to reconnect with family and friends and spend the whole month of August in New Zealand. I wasn't very present on social media while I was in New Zealand. I just wanted to be with my family in the moment, just soaking up every opportunity I could, and I am so pleased that I sort of had that time off from posting, from making videos. I did, however, make one vlog, which was just very spontaneous. Me just walking along the beach in Napier, New Zealand, with the wind blowing through my hair. You could hear the wind in the background. It was super loud, but it was just a very raw and real vlog, and a lot of you really enjoyed that, and I had so many comments about how happy I looked, and you guys all seemed so just happy for me to finally be back in New Zealand after so many years. And I have to tell you, I was on top of the world, just so incredibly happy. The thing is, I feel as though a lot of you maybe thought that I was having regrets about moving to Germany, and I did get comments like, why would you want to live in Germany if you are from such a beautiful country and you have the opportunity to live in New Zealand with your family? Why did you choose Germany? You seem so happy in New Zealand. And I just wanted to clear a few things up and just sort of let you know how I'm feeling right now after returning back to Germany after such a wonderful time in New Zealand. I want to just talk about whether I do have regrets and how I feel and all of that kind of stuff. The honest truth is I am feeling great. I am so happy to be back in Germany, back into my routine, my life here in Germany. I feel better than I have felt in a long time. It has a lot to do with the fact that I was able to go back to my homeland and reconnect with everybody and just spend much needed quality time with my loved ones, and it really just filled up my tank or my cup or whatever you want to call it. I feel like my trip to New Zealand just gave me everything I was hoping for and more. This trip back to New Zealand felt really different for me than the other times I've been back, in the way that it put so much into perspective about my life and my decisions, and it really confirmed to me that I have made the right decision to live in Germany. If you've been following my journey, you will know how much I have agonized over not being able to get back to New Zealand. I have had so many doubts in my mind, wondering, have I made the right decision? I had this nagging feeling in my mind that kept creeping up, where I just felt like my kids were missing out on life in New Zealand and they weren't experiencing the childhood that I experienced in New Zealand. And I've talked about this a lot in my videos, and it was really bothering me because I just kept thinking I was missing out. It's like fear of missing out. I think there's like a saying, some kind of a saying, but it's sort of like the grass is always greener when you think everything's always better, you know, on the other side. When I got back to New Zealand, for the first week or so, it was just like catching up with family, reuniting with everybody, just catching up on lost time and trying to spend as much quality time as I could with, you know, loved ones, and visiting all the places that I had missed and all of that kind of thing. And then I slowly started to sort of settle into life in New Zealand. And then I realized, you know what, New Zealand is amazing, and I could easily be happy living here with my family, but I am so happy with my life in Germany, and I had this kind of overwhelming feeling of just acceptance for all of my decisions. It's really hard to explain. It was kind of like this realization that I'm not living in Germany because I have to. It's because I want to, I choose to, and I realized that we are so happy in Germany right now. It is where we need to be. It's where my soul feels happy. It's really hard to explain. Coming back to New Zealand after being away for so many years, over 5 years, it really helped me see New Zealand through a different lens. And it wasn't a negative lens by any means, it was just a different point of view. It was a different way of looking at New Zealand, more as a visitor to my homeland than somebody who was living there and experiencing my life in New Zealand, raising my kids. I felt really clear in my mind. I wasn't looking at New Zealand through rose-colored glasses. I was looking at New Zealand realistically and thinking to myself, could I imagine raising my kids here? Could I imagine living back in New Zealand? And as I said, of course, I could imagine being happy in New Zealand, but I choose to be in Germany right now because it's where I feel the happiest. And I feel happy in a different way when I'm back in New Zealand. New Zealand is familiar. It is where I spent the majority of my life. I have a lot of family in New Zealand. Many of my family are scattered around the world, have also branched out and traveled and found their homes in other countries. My siblings, I have 4 siblings and 3 of them are all living in different countries. I was so happy to come back to my homeland where the language was familiar, where the landscape was so familiar and the food and everything. But I found myself at times missing Germany and certain things about Germany, and my kids would often talk about Germany and tell people about their lives back in Germany, and they were so proud to share, you know, things about the German culture with their New Zealand friends and family. For me, the most bizarre thing about coming back to New Zealand was the fact that we were actually staying in my childhood home. So my mum recently downsized and rebought our childhood home where I grew up, and Amelia was actually sleeping in the room where I slept for my whole childhood. And it was such a weird feeling just going back to the home that I grew up in. I just had so many of my beautiful childhood memories in this home, and I also had a lot of really difficult, painful memories of my dad going through his battle with leukemia, and it was a very, very emotional time for me being back in my childhood home. I thought that going back to New Zealand to my childhood home was going to be really, really difficult in the way that I wouldn't want to leave, that I just would not want to go back to Germany. I just would want to stay. But I didn't feel that. I felt like, okay, I'm visiting and I'm having this amazing experience. But I was looking forward to going back to my home in Germany that Rob and I built for our family, a life that we had created for our family in Germany. So I just felt the joy of being back in New Zealand, but I also felt the excitement for when we would return to Germany and seeing my friends and our home and Rob's family. And so it was a really wonderful realization and a wonderful kind of acceptance that, you know, I am a Kiwi, a New Zealander living in Germany, and I'm really happy with where I am in my life. What was really hard for me was during the pandemic when I knew that I could not get back to New Zealand even if I wanted to. And I found that just extremely difficult, as a lot of you know. Now that I've actually been back to New Zealand, I've had my New Zealand fix. I got to eat all of my favorite food, and I got to just see all of my favorite people and my favorite places, and my kids got to experience Kiwi culture and all of that. I feel satisfied. I feel so happy. I'm so excited for our next trip to New Zealand, and I am excited to be able to just live my life in Germany right now. I'm excited for my mum to come and visit us in Germany. I'm excited for so many things to come here and just to live my daily life here and catch up with my friends, my expat friends who are on the same wavelength as me. I cannot wait for Christmas and the Christmas markets here, and I still have that longing in my heart for New Zealand, but it's not that painful longing that I had when I knew that I couldn't get back. It's that longing for New Zealand where I wish it was closer. Like, I wish so much that it was closer, but I don't have any regrets about my decision to live here. The first week that we were in New Zealand, I actually asked the kids whether they could imagine living in New Zealand, and they both said, no, we want to live in Germany. So I actually asked them again after a few weeks. I said to them, now that you've spent more time in New Zealand, could you imagine living here? And both of them said, no, we still want to live in Germany. And Amelia said, maybe when I'm older, which I found really, really interesting because they had an incredible time there. They loved their trip to New Zealand. They loved being surrounded by the English language. I noticed that their English improved so much over the 4 weeks they were there. Their vocabulary improved, and they really immersed themselves in Kiwi culture, and they loved every moment of it. But Germany is deeply ingrained in my kids. Like, they are German kids. At the end of the 4 weeks, when we had to say goodbye to everybody and leave New Zealand, it was absolutely heart-wrenching. It was like traumatizing when I think about how difficult that goodbye was. The kids were sobbing. We were sobbing. It was so hard, so painful. I didn't think my heart could cope. It was just too much for my heart to handle. We didn't want to leave New Zealand. We just wanted New Zealand and Germany to be intertwined. And I felt so bad and so guilty for putting my kids through that pain of having to say goodbye. Our hearts were so heavy on that trip back to Germany. But something I will never forget is when we hopped on the airplane in London, and this was actually a Lufthansa flight, the flight where we lost all of our luggage. But I remember hopping on that flight and seeing Amelia's face when she heard the German announcement on the airplane. She was so excited to hear the German language again, to finally hear her mother tongue after 4 weeks away. She said to me, oh my gosh, I realized that I've hardly spoken German for a whole month and I miss it, and I'm excited about getting back to Germany. And oh my goodness, that made me so happy because she had just been so sad leaving New Zealand. Her heart was broken, and Matteo, seeing Amelia so happy, automatically just lit up and said, I can't wait to get back to Germany too. And they were just so excited. I remember when we flew into Frankfurt, the kids were looking out the window and they were just like, ah, we're home. I also felt that too. I felt really happy to be back in Germany. That doesn't take anything away from the amazing time that we had in New Zealand. It was just such a nice feeling to realize that, yes, Germany is my home. New Zealand is my home too, but I'm a multicultural person and I'm proud of that. So basically, I just wanted to share what has been on my heart since I've been back in Germany. And so many of you have asked me, you guys are so sweet and so considerate, just asking me how I'm feeling, because I know many of you probably think that I am really miserable being back, and you know, so many of you saw my vlog in New Zealand and saw how happy I was, and I was just so happy. But I'm also happy being back in Germany, and I'm looking forward to the next time we can visit New Zealand. Hopefully it's not going to be as long between visits as it was the last time. I'm going to make sure it's not. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this little heart-to-heart. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. That actually really helps me out. It lets YouTube know that you like my content, and then they will promote my videos more and more people can see them. Also, don't forget to subscribe. I know so many of you who watch my videos are not actually subscribed, so if you would subscribe, that would mean the world to me. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram, and I will see you again really soon. Bye!